is a housing crash certainty. Yes, a certainty. Home prices surged, and we now have mortgage rates at 20-month highs. However, this crash might not be where you're looking for it. Let me show you what's going on. Hi, I'm Keith Weinhold. This is Get Rich Education. I think it's important to understand that home buyers purchase a home not so much based on its price, but based on whether or not they can afford the payment. So that rolls in the cost of the mortgage interest with that payment. And this is huge because 80% of the cost of a home for many people is tied up in that mortgage payment because that's how much you're borrowing. And of course, if you pay more in borrowing costs, you cannot afford as much. So even for the same priced home, you would have to pay more at a higher mortgage interest rate. Consequently, demand would begin to wane, and consequently, prices would need to fall, right? Well, let's take a look at this, and you're definitely going to have a clear answer, yes or no, by the end of this video, and you'll know why. Now, as we've discussed, if mortgage interest rates rise, home prices must, not fall. They typically rise. Yes, home prices typically rise when mortgage interest rates rise. In fact, let's look at this chart here. I've shown it to you before. What we're looking at here is, in fact, the last 6 times that mortgage interest rates rose, home prices rose every single time. Yes, this has happened 6 times since 1994, where we had higher mortgage interest rates, and correspondingly, each time, all 6, home prices rose in response to that. And it was April to December of 2018 where we had the last time that mortgage interest rates rose substantially. So we even have some fairly recent history with this here. Now understand that the low mortgage interest rates that we have had, and they're still low, they're just higher now than they were, this phenomenon could lead to even less housing supply than there already is. Yes, a further housing shortage, and I'm going to show you more with that in just a bit here. See, some people with low mortgage rates, they're not going to want to let their properties go. If they buy another home, they're oftentimes going to keep that first one at that ultra low mortgage rate, maybe that's even below 3%. They're going to want to keep that as a rental. And understand, with what's going on here, this bodes well for home improvement businesses and home remodeling businesses and suppliers to home remodelers and do-it-yourselfers like Lowe's and Home Depot. This is good for them because for a lot of people, rather than moving, what they might do is build an add-on, make an addition to their home, do what they need to do to keep that low rate in place. The point is supply does not come onto the market as much when mortgage interest rates go up, which is one reason why prices typically go up when mortgage interest rates rise. Hey, go ahead and put a like on this if you would, if you like what you're hearing, especially if you've learned something already. There's quite a bit more to learn here. So as we're talking about supply not coming onto the market, whenever we have these shortages of supplies and materials drag on like this, like we do, that further constrains supply. A while back, near the beginning of the crisis here, there was a shortage of lumber, and lumber prices spiked, and prices spiked for all kinds of components that go into a home, from drywall to cabinet hardware to all sorts of things. You might remember ships, a long line of ships waiting in port just off the docks there in LA and Long Beach. Yes, all these supply chain bottlenecks that constrain supply. And let's take a look at this story from the Wall Street Journal. Supply chain issues now leave homes, without garage doors and gutters. I guess you could live in a home without a gutter. Without garage doors, I don't know, that's a bit more difficult to do. But the point is that the supply chain problems continue to persist here. And you need to understand that the available supply of housing in most regions, that's something that is defined as inelastic. That means it's relatively slow to change, and building is slow, and replacing homes is something that's slow. It can take a year or several years to go through processes like planning and zoning and the development process for a small cluster of homes all the way up to 100 homes. It really takes a while. You're not going to cure this condition anytime soon with this low supply. That's inelastic. So we have this inelastic supply, and the demand for housing is inelastic because that can fluctuate up and down due to factors like employment rates or wage growth or job growth or interest rate levels, or even mortgage loan underwriting conditions can make demand fluctuate, right? If they loosen up lending and it's easier to get a home, that effectively increases demand because more people have the capacity to pay for that property now. So supply is inelastic. Like a rubber band with no elasticity to it, the supply of available homes really doesn't change very quickly. So here we go. Let's take a look at this all-important chart. You've seen this chart before, but here's an update to the chart because we have the latest month added here. This is the active listing count of single-family homes, condos, and townhomes. Yes, this is your American housing supply. And as you see, as you start at the left here and you move across slowly to the right, you can see that back in 2016, we had more than 1.5 million available homes. As you move to the right, typically you see this hump because those humps take place kind of summer or late summer. And then you see the trough here at the bottom each year during the holidays and during the winter months when there's just simply less activity. Well, that trend back there in June, July of 2020, where the available supply, these listings that are on the market, available homes to buy, you could see that it didn't go up. It didn't create a crest in 2020, and it just fell to some incredible lows about a year ago. And we had the hump there in late 2021, and that hump was lower than ever. And look at where we are now with still fewer than 500,000 homes, 1/3 the supply that we had just 5 to 6 years ago. That's where we're at. That's why we have this dearth of supply. And see, when you have a dearth of supply, that fuels bidding wars because you have a lot more demand than you do supply. And bidding wars do what? Make prices go higher. That's Economics 101, supply and demand. How low is this going to go on the right side of the chart? It's already super low. Could bottom out to an all new low until we hit spring or summer. So yeah, these low interest rates could lead to a further housing shortage. Like I said, some people with low rate mortgages don't want to let their properties go. Now, let me just ask you this question in order for you to understand this. If you live in a home where you have a 3% mortgage interest rate, and mortgage interest rates go up to 5%, let me ask you, how likely are you to move? You might move, but you're a lot less likely to do that because you would have to pay more just for an equivalent replacement home. And what do you do? Or really, it's more of a function of what do you not do? You don't put your home on the market. That supply doesn't come on. It stays off the market. And really, that condition right there will be reflected in that chart as we track it over time, the available supply of homes. So the real crash in housing is not a price crash. It is a supply crash, and it's a certainty because it already happened, and now it is crashing down potentially even further. It is poised to crash even further to less than 1/3 of the supply of homes that we had 5 or 6 years ago. And I think it's important that you understand something. In my opinion, a supply crash is more severe, it's more significant, it's worse than a price crash. Because if there's a price crash, well, that's bad, but that affected homeowners and people that probably had the wherewithal to own a home in the first place. If there's a supply crash and people can't even get in to own a home and our society is underhoused, that's huge. This is food, shelter, and safety stuff. We don't even have adequate shelter for people. And the one thing that you do not see reflected in that chart that I just showed you is that entry-level homes are even more scarce, even more sparse. Builders aren't motivated to build entry-level homes because they're simply not as profitable. This increases homelessness. That's my point. The crash is certain. It happened. It's poised to get worse. It is not a housing price crash. Prices are going to stay healthy. It is a housing supply crash. And it's getting worse. I already mentioned a couple months ago that my prediction for this year is that national median home prices will rise 9 to 10%. Prices are going to stay healthy, partly due to that low supply that mortgage interest rates really can't take away from these rising prices. So yeah, I'm kind of sorry to say that. It really is some bad news. Be sure to stay tuned here. I continue to track this and all the developments in housing, as you know, but I've really kept my eye on the supply with that chart that I showed you earlier, just like I've showed you a few times on the channel starting last year. It's really important to do that in order to know what the future direction of the housing market is going to be. Hey, go ahead and subscribe to the channel here if you would. I think that's like a best practice or something that you're supposed to ask about, and I don't think I've asked you to do that in months. So go ahead and subscribe and then hit the little notification bell next to the subscribe button if you do want to be notified when the next video is here for you as we continue to track the direction of the housing market and trying to predict where it's going to go next. I'm Keith Weinhold. Thanks for being here, but you weren't here for me. You were here for you. We'll see you in the next video.